Hey guys, good morning. Welcome to another episode of Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. Thank you for joining me today. This is episode 125 of Hockey on the Spot. And how about those New York Rangers, huh? Going all the way to the Stanley Cup Finals. Who would have thunk it, huh? Congratulations to them. Definitely a great moment right now for all New Yorkers. Just a great time right now. Just a lot to celebrate about. It's just an amazing feeling as they defeat the Montreal Canadiens in 6 games. They finally managed to win a series in less than 7 games, which is great. Which is great for them. I'm extremely happy for them. I'm really hoping that they pull it off and win the Stanley Cup this year. Just considering that I'm a New Yorker myself, so it would be great to see the Stanley Cup here in New York. So, but obviously, it didn't come easy for the Rangers. Obviously, they had a tough run to get this far. Obviously going to 2 7-game series with their 2 Pennsylvania rivals, the Philadelphia Flyers and the Pittsburgh Penguins. And now obviously to go up against a Montreal Canadiens team who they've had struggles against for the past few seasons, especially in Montreal. And that's where the series started. As we take a look now at the series overview, the first 2 games in Montreal, surprisingly enough, with a building where the Rangers absolutely struggled, managed to pull off 2 humongous wins. None more humongous than Game 1, though. A 7-2 win in Game 1 at the Garden. The only game of the series that Carey Price would play in. He would suffer an injury in that game. Actually, both teams would suffer an injury in that game. For the Montreal Canadiens, it would be the starting goaltender, Carey Price, who would miss the remainder of the series, and now, of course, the remainder of the Stanley Cup playoffs, technically. And for the Rangers, it would be Derek Brassard, who would miss the next 2 games with an upper body injury. But as big of losses as those were, as big as of the losses that was for the Rangers, they did not let that stop them, and they came out strong and managed to win, and not just win, but destroy the competition. Ryan McDonough was absolutely tremendous in that game. Game 2, also in Montreal, another Ranger win. 3-1 was the final score. The Rangers managed to win despite the fact that Montreal would get the first goal. After that first goal, though, it would be all Rangers in that game. 3-1 would be the final score, as they took a 2-0 series lead back to Madison Square Garden. Just absolutely exciting. The crowd rocking. The Rangers Game 3, kind of a weird one. The Rangers absolutely dominated that game, but Montreal would steal that one in overtime for 2 reasons. One, tremendous play by Dustin Tokarski, who would be the goaltender that would take Carey Price's place for the rest of the series. And 2, some of the worst officiating I've ever seen. A lot of calls let go. None worse, though, than the Brandon Prost hit on Derek Stepan. Derek Stepan would sustain the injury and play the remainder of the game, but he would miss Game 4. We'll get to that in a second. But Brandon Prost would receive a 2-game suspension for his actions. However, the big news from that game, Dan Carcillo, who would be inserted into the lineup in that game, received a 10-game suspension. And because this series did not go to 7 games, that clinches that Carcillo will not be back until next season, whether it's with the Rangers or another team. The only way Carcillo could have come back would have been if if this series had gone to 7 games and the Rangers had gone to the Stanley Cup Finals and then that series had gone to 7 games. Then and only then Dan Carcillo would have been eligible to return for Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals, but now he cannot return until next year. He got a 10-game suspension, obviously, for, believe it was hitting the ref or grabbing the referee or something like that. But regardless, just a tough game to watch, especially if you're a Ranger fan. Actually, at the game, the final score, Rangers dominate, but the final score 3-2 in overtime, courtesy of a player who just absolutely loves to dominate the Rangers, Alex Galchenyuk, the 3rd overall pick from the 2012 NHL entry draft. He's a superstar in the making. So, tough one to swallow there. Game 4, Montreal back at the Garden. Montreal takes that motivation from Game 3 into Game 4. Rangers get Derek Brassard back. And it was a big help because Montreal absolutely dominated in Game 4. Now it was the Rangers' turn to steal a game at the Garden. Montreal dominates the game. However, they never led because Henrik Lundqvist, for that game, it was his time to shine. He absolutely dominated that game, and it was paid off as the Rangers would go on to win a 3-2 overtime game of their own. Martin St. Louis, the Montreal native, or the Quebec City native, would score the overtime winner off a beautiful play to keep the puck in the zone. St. Louis had a tremendous series. He really did. Now, Game 5 back in Montreal. Rangers a 3-1 series lead with the chance to close it out. They get Derek Stepan back. They get Derek Stepan back. Obviously, again, and Derek Brassard already back, as I have mentioned. He actually had a goal in Game 4, by the way. It went in his return. As did Derek Stepan in his return. He'd have 2 goals while wearing a face mask. However, Montreal was not willing to go quietly, especially in their own building. Probably the one game of this series that we can truly say that Montreal not only dominated, but caught the Rangers off their game. This was the Rangers' worst game of the series. Henrik Lundqvist did not play well. He would eventually be pulled for Cam Talbot, and even he did not help the cause. Montreal got the first goal of the game. Then the Rangers would actually tie it up, but then after that it was all Montreal. They took a 4-1 lead before Henrik Lundqvist would eventually be pulled for Cam Talbot. However, when he got pulled, the Rangers would manage to pull off kind of a comeback. They managed to come back and tie the game at 4 apiece. However, after that, it was the Rennie Bourque show, folks. That's right. Rennie Bourque would go on to complete a hat trick, and that would be en route to a 7-4 victory at the Bell Center for Montreal. Without a doubt, the Rangers' worst game of the series. And to make matters worse, they lost John Moore, not just for that game, but for a couple games. John Moore was to receive a 2-game suspension for a hit. I forget who he hit. I'll have to look at the highlights again. But, yeah, he made a play to hit somebody, and he got suspended for 2 games. He still, because the Rangers won tonight, John Moore will have to serve Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals. He will not be eligible to play that game. He will be eligible to return for Game 2, however. Oh yeah, and the bad news I also forgot to mention from Game 4, by the way, is that Montreal did lose Alexei Yemelin for the rest of the series. He suffered an injury. He had been banged up the whole series, and that proved, even though it didn't show right away, actually it kind of did. Game 5, even though Montreal won, it was 7-4. They still let up 4 goals. So not having their best shutdown defenseman on the back end really hurt them, and in Game 6 it kind of hurt as well. Maybe if Yemelin is in the lineup for Game 6, the game goes to overtime scoreless. 1-0 win in Game 6 at the Garden for the Rangers. Dominic Moore scoring the only goal of the game. The Rangers got back to their game, and they actually dominated most of the game. The only real pressure Montreal had in the game were the final few minutes. As expected, they only generated 18 shots, a shutout for Henrik Lundqvist, and that is where we stood for the series. The New York Rangers are going to the Stanley Cup Finals. Congratulations to them once again. They will await their next opponent. It will be either the Chicago Blackhawks or the Los Angeles Kings. Game 6 at the Staples Center will be tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern. 9 o'clock Eastern, actually. So be sure to check that out. The LA Kings hold a 3-2 series lead. Chicago coming off a 5-4 overtime victory. But that building is going to be rocking. And LA fans are expecting to make it to the finals this year. They really are. So they have the potential to do it. So we'll see what happens. Now, with all these series, we always ask ourselves questions: why the Rangers won and why Montreal lost. Well, we're going to go over that right now. First off, why the Rangers managed to win the series. Their defense held up for most of the series. Montreal could not get anything going with the Rangers' defense. You think of guys like Dan Girardi, Mark Stahl, Ryan McDonagh. Ryan McDonagh was the best of anybody, in my opinion, in this whole series. Guys like Kevin Kline stepping up in this series. I think he really showed up in this series and had his best series of the playoffs by far, joining the rushes and generating offensive chances, considering he's a shutdown defenseman. Guys like that really stepped up, clogged the zones. It was just amazing for the Rangers. Those guys came up big for them. Henrik Lundqvist once again absolutely shutting down the door. With the exception of an off Game 5, Henrik Lundqvist shut down the door in this series, even in Game 3. Lundqvist probably was the overall star of this series. Again, rough Game 5 for sure. Not just for him, but for all Rangers. But he was just great throughout those series. He got Montreal frustrated, and he got them off their game as well. The Rangers allowing Montreal to take undisciplined penalties. The frustration obviously is a big part of the game, and Montreal definitely got frustrated at a lot of points. Rangers' defensive style managed to get Montreal off their game a bit and frustrate them and cause penalties to happen. And the Rangers' power play was actually very good in this series. Another reason why they won. Their power play effectiveness. Not like the Pittsburgh series where their power play wasn't effective at all, or even the Flyer series where their power play couldn't get going. In this series, their power play was at its best, and it looked like a real Alain Vigneault power play for the most part. They didn't let up any shorthanded goals. So it was great. Well, actually, I take that back. They did let up one shorthanded goal. That was in Game 1. I forgot about that. But the game was already way over by that point, so it really doesn't feel like they did. But their power play was great. That's for the most part. It really was. So those are some of the reasons why the Rangers won. I'm trying to think. And one of the other main reasons too was the effectiveness of the line of Brad Richards, Martin St. Louis, and Carl Hagelin. Without a doubt, in my opinion, for most of the games, that was the Rangers' most consistent line in the series. And you think of how well the Brassard, Pouliot, Zuccarello line played in the Pittsburgh series. In this series, it was the Richards line. It was their turn to shine. They were absolutely great in this series. There was not one game where Carl Hagelin looked flat-footed. He was skating. He generated chances, especially in games 3 and 4. He was great. Marty St. Louis as well. Very noticeable in all the games. And then of course you got Brad Richards. He's their quarterback on the power play, and he's looked like a real power play quarterback for them. in this series. Brad Richards has come alive, not like last year's playoffs where we saw him scratched for the final couple games. He's far past that point now, and he's just had a tremendous playoffs. And even the fourth line, actually, the last game, obviously, last night, the fourth line, probably the Rangers' best line. They generate the only goal, but just the overall play. How about Brian Boyle in the series, too? I think the play of Brian Boyle has taken his game to a level that we really have never seen from him before. When we've seen him here in New York, we were used to seeing him make these bad plays and make these turnovers and letting his size get the best of him and slowing him down. But that has not been the case in these playoffs. In these playoffs, Boyle seems like has finally found his role as a shutdown player and has really just come alive here. It could be because, maybe he feels that this could be his final few games as a Ranger. Maybe he feels that. But who knows, If he keeps playing like this, maybe he does come back. You never know. But we'll see. It's going to be an interesting situation, and obviously the Rangers don't have to worry about the offseason for at least for another series now. They made it to the farthest point that they can get, win or lose. So we don't have to worry about that for them right now. But Boyle has been one heck of a player for the Rangers in this series. So those are the reasons why the Rangers won. Now we get to the reasons why Montreal lost the series. The first reason, probably the first and most important reason, was the absence of Carey Price. As well as Dustin Tokarski played, and believe me, Dustin Tokarski was absolutely tremendous. He will be a starting goaltender in the future. Probably will not be with Montreal, though. It'll be elsewhere for a team that needs a goalie. But he played tremendous. Give a lot of credit to Dustin Tokarski. However, even with that being said, I do feel that if Carey Price had been healthy to play the entire series, he would have probably been playing out of this world. He obviously had a rough game one, but so did every Montreal player. But I feel like there were certain goals that would not have happened had Carey Price been in goal. Price, I think, would have made it a bit of a different series. Maybe we see a 7-game series instead of a 6-game series. Who knows? Maybe Montreal even comes and wins the series in 6 games or so, or 5 games even. Who knows what would have happened if Carey Price had been in the lineup. I think the Rangers at times had been very fortunate in these playoffs with their opponents not having certain players in their lineup. Like for the Flyers series, the Flyers didn't have Steve Mason for the first few games. That's why the Rangers managed to win 2 of the first 3 games. Stuff like that. I don't think there was anybody missing. Oh, the Pittsburgh series, they didn't have Brooks Orpik for a couple games. And Brooks Orpik's a very good shutdown defenseman and hitter. So that was a big loss for Pittsburgh. And this series, obviously, the Montreal didn't have Carey Price. So the Rangers have been very fortunate not seeing certain players on the other end of the ice. That probably would have made a difference. So I think that's a big reason for their run. And Montreal is no different. They didn't have Carey Price. And they also, of course, they didn't have Alexei Yemelin for the last couple games, and that hurt them. So, that's one of the reasons. Number 2, power play struggles. The Montreal Canadiens' power play was bad in this series. They were just really, really bad. Which you could also say was another reason why the Rangers won, actually, because their penalty killing was actually very, very good. And the Rangers themselves actually took quite a few penalties in this series, some undisciplined, but through it all, Montreal only managed to generate 2 power play goals in the entire series, 1 in Game 4 and 1 in Game 5. Their power play was awful. And you think of Montreal, and I believe if I recall, they had one of the better power plays in the league during the regular season, something I can definitely check out. But their power play was just absolutely ineffective throughout these entire playoffs. or no, excuse me, throughout this entire series. And in the playoffs overall, their power play was 7th. In the regular season, their power play was... Montreal's power play was... okay, 19th. So it really wasn't that good during the regular season, actually. But it wasn't terrible. It wasn't like it was the worst power play. But still, you got to do better than that when you get these power play opportunities. And you think of a guys like PK Subban and Andrei Markov manning the points and those big shots of theirs. Those are their power play quarterbacks. Markov's been their power play quarterback for years. Subban is their new stud on the blue line in today's generation. And that actually takes us into the next reason why they lost. PK Subban's inconsistency throughout this series. Through the first 3 games, PK Subban did not look like the same player that we saw in the Boston series. In the Boston series and even the Tampa Bay series, PK Subban took his game up to a completely different level, and he looked like a real superstar on that blue line. He looked like someone who was just toying with the other players. It seemed like every little thing he did, it was just a guy just getting warmed up and was only getting better and better. And he just seemed unstoppable. Against Tampa Bay, that was what led to the sweep. And against Boston, that's what led to the 3-2 series comeback to win it in 7. The games that Montreal won against Boston, Subban was the star. Even some of the games that they lost, Subban really managed to get under the skin of the Bruins, and he really developed a nasty reputation throughout these playoffs, and his reputation continues to go downhill. That's Subban, though. When it came to this series, the Rangers managed to shut him down for the most part. In Game 4, he finally managed to come alive. Game 4, in my opinion, was probably his best game. And then Game 5, he played really well as well. Last night, however, he looked like the same PK Subban we saw through the first 3 games. But, and you're not going to win series that way. When your best player doesn't look like your best player, you're going to lose a series most likely. But things happen that way. Sometimes your best players don't play well in the playoffs. Look at Sidney Crosby. He's probably the perfect example for this season. The best player in the regular season, but without a doubt, his worst postseason ever in his career. He was absolutely terrible in the postseason this year. That's one reason why Montreal lost. We talked about the injury to Carey Price. It was just injuries in general for Montreal that really hurt them. Another injury I actually did forget about, they didn't have Dale Weiss for Game 6. He had an injury. I think the injury, I don't know what the injury was. I think it was undisclosed. But yeah, Dale Weiss was out of the lineup. And actually, now that I think about it, that could have been the player that John Moore hit in Game 5. But, who knows? Who cares at this point? But anyway, and then I think the final reason for Montreal's losing is just undisciplined. They were very undisciplined in this series. I mean, so are the Rangers at times, but Montreal definitely was a lot more undisciplined in this series. And not to mention this, actually another reason I almost forgot about, through the first 2 games, we talked about how the Bell Center had been an absolute house of horrors for the Rangers. Well, the House of Horrors just wasn't the House of Horrors. The House of Horrors was not there, and that really hurt Montreal because then the Rangers came alive at the Bell Center, which you could also say why they won the series. They managed to pull 2 wins out of a building that they just absolutely struggled in through the last few years. So those are the reasons why Montreal lost and why the Rangers won. Montreal, though, got to give them a lot of credit this year. Even though they're not going to the finals, a lot of Montreal fans obviously were anticipating their first trip to the Stanley Cup Finals since their last cup in 1993, where they beat the Los Angeles Kings in 5 games. A lot of people expected a possible rematch from that year, and I think a lot of Montreal fans were anticipating a rematch. They were anticipating finally getting back to the finals, but they could not. And it's unfortunate for them because they were indeed the only Canadian team in the playoffs this year. But that's why you got to give them a lot of credit. The only Canadian team, the only team in the playoffs representing Canada this year, and they come all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals. Bravo to the Montreal Canadiens. You got to give them a lot of credit. I give them a round of applause. It's too bad that they couldn't go to the finals, but that's life. The Rangers definitely. Anyone could tell you the Rangers definitely earned it more. Exactly 20 years ago that they were last in the finals. The 20th anniversary, the 20 years since their last cup of the great 1994, and now they're back in the finals. And I don't necessarily think that they'll win, but at least they're there, and it's something for Ranger fans to be very proud of. Win or lose, this is a Ranger season to be extremely proud of. Ranger fans do not have any complaints, win or lose. Now for Montreal, obviously now, but like any team, as great as their run was representing Canada, now their off season officially begins, and like any other team, a lot of questions pop up, and they have a lot of good free agents for this year, including the number 1 free agent on the market for this year, without a doubt, Thomas Vanek, their trade deadline acquisition from the New York Islanders. Vanek played, obviously, also was on the Buffalo Sabres this year. So Vanek played for 3 teams this season. He is not only Montreal's top free agent, but he will without a doubt be the most sought after free agent in the NHL this year. He is going to be the top prize in the free agent frenzy this year. There's going to be lots to talk about him till the day he signs. Now, a lot of people are anticipating that Thomas Vanek is going to be getting right on a plane and heading right up to upstate Minnesota this offseason. A lot of people do believe that because of the relationship he has with Jason Pominville, that he is getting on a plane and going right to Minnesota. The belief is that the Minnesota Wild will be the team signing Thomas Vanek over the offseason this year. However, I really don't know. I don't know. I just don't feel like I see it. I think it would be a great signing for Minnesota. But I feel like there's other locations that Vanek could look into. There's going to be a lot of teams interested in him. One team for sure will be the Anaheim Ducks, who were actually this close to acquiring Vanek at the trade deadline. And they were the team that kind of wanted to get Vanek. Excuse me as I move to a different location. Sorry about that, guys. So yeah, Vanek, will be the top prize in this year's free agent frenzy. A lot of teams are going to be looking at him. The Ducks, again, were this close, and they had the offer to get him in place, one that Garth Snow foolishly did not take, and instead chose to go with the lesser offer that Montreal gave. So we'll see how this offseason goes. Thomas Vanek is going to be the top prize. And actually, he really didn't play well in this series with the Rangers, which actually is another reason why they lost. I actually forgot about that one. His ineffectiveness in the Rangers series. Thomas Vanek was without a doubt their weakest link, their weakest performer. He did not play well at all in this series. And actually, really, you could kind of say in the playoffs in general, he really didn't play well. Even though he could put up quite a few points, defensively, he was just off, and at times he was on the fourth line. So, a rough series, rough playoff for Thomas Vanek, which could also play a lot into where he's going to go, into who's going to be interested in him this offseason. But again, he will be the top free agent prize for sure. Other free agents for the Montreal Canadiens up front include George Peros, who missed pretty much the whole season with concussion problems. Michael Blunden, no one really important. And their captain, Brian Giunta. Brian Giunta, another pretty big free agent name, actually. Giunta, 34 years of age, but can still play the game, would be a good fit for a team that's looking for a veteran sniper who can still actually play the game pretty well. Brian Giunta is still a pretty effective player, still a top 6 forward in my mind. So I think it would be interested to see him go back to a team, to his roots, and go back to a team like the New Jersey Devils. That would be pretty interesting, joining his brother there. But, I'm sure other teams are going to be looking into him. Montreal may try to bring him back. Who knows? We'll see, though. It's going to be an interesting offseason for Brian Giunta, for sure, as he'll be one of the top free agents as well. On defense, a lot more free agents on defense for Montreal, including 34-year-old veteran Andrei Markov. One of the top prizes on defense this year. Again, he's 34 years old. Montreal, they're going to be talking with Markov because Markov obviously wants to stay in Montreal. He's still a very effective and popular player there. But we'll see. It's going to be really interesting. It may be time for Markov to test the waters and go elsewhere. He's definitely not at the age where he's going to retire yet. He's still got a couple of years left in him, maybe at least 3. But, we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see where he goes. Francis Bouillon, he is 37 years of age, an unrestricted free agent. We'll see where he goes, if he even comes back, actually. I could actually see Francis Bouillon having one more year in him. He played well this season, especially in the playoffs. And Montreal could explore the idea of bringing him back. Douglas Murray, 33 years of age. He is a free agent this year. He didn't really have a big role in Montreal this year, so you could expect that he'll look to go somewhere where he'll have a bigger role as a top 6 defenseman, which he definitely still has the potential of being. And then Mike Weaver, 35 years of age, an unrestricted free agent as well. He definitely has a couple of years left in him. I could see Montreal signing this guy. He's someone who I think has a lot of potential. And then guys like Martin St. Pierre, Nick Tarnasky in the minors, Devin Dubnyk also. 3 unrestricted free agents there. Devin Dubnyk, he's been such a huge disappointment, been part of 3 teams this year, the Edmonton Oilers, Nashville Predators, and Montreal Canadiens. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens to Devin Dubnyk, if he could go somewhere in a backup role. Montreal also a few restricted free agents this year. Lars Eller is a restricted free agent. You could bet your bet on it that they'll come to terms on a contract. Ryan White, he's one of their more valuable fourth liners. They'll probably sign him. Same with Dale Weiss, who they got from the Vancouver Canucks. He's a restricted free agent. PK Subban, their only restricted free agent on the blue line. He definitely will be signed to a big contract. You could expect a huge contract coming in the offseason for PK Subban. He earns it. He definitely earns it. So we'll see what happens to him. Other restricted free agents include Louis LeBlanc, who they'll probably sign, Greg Paterno, who has a lot of potential. Dustin Tokarski is a restricted free agent. I can see them trying to trade him. Again, they already have Carey Price. They could probably get something pretty good in a trade with Dustin Tokarski, because he's not going to be anything in Montreal. He needs to go somewhere where he can be a starting goaltender. He's still young. He is 23 years of age, so he's got a lot of potential. He needs to go somewhere where he, where he's got a lot of potential, where he's going to have the potential to be a starter. And then some other unimportant names: Jonas Natanen, Elaine Berger, Peter Delmas, and Robert Jarnik. Guys like that, not important names. But Montreal, they don't have the most free agents in the league, but the free agents they have are definitely some important names. It's going to be a fire sale in Montreal for sure. They're going to look to lock up a lot of guys, but they're also going to look to let some guys go. It's going to be a very interesting off season in Montreal this year. But with that being said, once again, congratulations to the New York Rangers. They are going to the Stanley Cup Finals for the first time in exactly 20 years, where they will await their next opponent, the Los Angeles Kings or the Chicago Blackhawks once again. Game 6 tonight, 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time at the Staples Center. The Kings hold a 3-2 series lead. They are one win away from a trip to the Stanley Cup Finals, and I'll be sure to be posting a video whenever that series is over. If the Hawks manage to win tonight, then Game 7 will be held Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern at the United Center. So, Hawks won the last one in overtime, so they'll definitely hope to keep it going and keep the motivation alive. And with that being said, folks, that'll do it for episode 125 of Hockey on the Spot. This has been Hockey on the Spot with Brandon Barenfeld. I'm Brandon Barenfeld. Thank you guys for joining me. I will see you guys again, possibly tomorrow. If the Kings win, then definitely tomorrow. If the Hawks win and we go to Game 7, then I will see you guys on Monday. Thank you guys for watching, and have a great day.